Haven's POV.
Ring, 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 ring. Hello, you have reached Wesley Stone. I am currently unavailable. I hung up before the mailbox greeting could finish. I didn't need to hear it. I'd heard it at least 100 times since Sunday. Happy fucking birthday to me, I muttered, tossing the phone on my bed and plopping down on my back. It had been 5 days since I'd seen Wesley. 5 days since I'd spoken to him. 5 days since he'd held me in his arms. I'd taken my time, thinking through every emotion and thought and concern I had about what Wesley had revealed to me after our unbelievable night together. The initial shock, the initial bombshell of him being a werewolf, a Leakin, wore off quickly. The fear of seeing that enormous, monstrous thing in place of my Wesley dissipated faster than I'd have thought possible. And left in its place was anger. Anger and irritation that he'd lied to me. That they had all lied to me. But mostly, I directed my anger at him. I could understand not telling me when we were kids. How would he have told me back then, anyway? Dear Haven, by the way, I'm a werewolf? I'd have thought he was either crazy or joking. I could even understand him not telling me before our first date. But after? There had been so many opportunities for him to let me in, to let me know the truth or to show me the truth, instead of letting our relationship start with lies. He'd even called himself my boyfriend before I'd realized that's what he was to me, what I thought of him as. If he considered himself my boyfriend, then he should have told me. It wasn't too much to ask of him to just be honest with me. So there I sat, on my birthday, alone in my apartment. Maya hadn't been back, so I hadn't even been able to ask her about any of the werewolf stuff or talk through my feelings about it all. About how the idea of Wesley being able to change into an animal-like creature really didn't even scare me. How I knew my initial fears of him doing something in that form that would injure me were completely misguided. Or how the idea no longer scared me, but made me feel safe. I didn't really want to think about that. Or what that said about me as a person. I didn't even want to think about the fact that it was Tuesday, and I'd been calling him for 2 days with no response. But there was nothing to distract me, nothing to help me distance myself from it all. So I'd sat. And sat. And waited and waited and waited. Only for there to be no return call, no message, nothing. At first I'd worried that something had happened. Maya'd said she needed to go home for a family emergency. Her home was in Wesley's hometown, his pack, I guess, since they were wolves. King of. What if something had happened to him? Or one of his friends? But there was no contact, not even a text to tell me he couldn't see me yet or anything. Then, my anger at being lied to turned into anger over being ignored. Being used. He'd given me the most wonderful night, showing me all the ways he could please a woman, please me. He'd held me close and made me feel special and treasured and safe and loved, and then when I asked for some space because I needed to think things through, he'd abandoned me. Just like everyone else always did. I rolled onto my side and curled my legs up so I lay in a tiny ball, closing my eyes against the bright light of the afternoon. I wanted to just fall asleep and stay there, but Jack and Shirley expected me for dinner. Well, they actually expected Wesley and me, but clearly that wasn't going to happen. I forced myself off of the mattress and trudged to my closet. I grabbed the first things I could find and changed out of Wesley's Stanford t-shirt I'd been wearing since Friday. Then I grabbed my purse and the keys to Maya's car so I could head on over. I figured she wouldn't mind if I used it again, since she wasn't even there. I wanted to drive myself, because I didn't want to call Shirley and ask her for a ride and have to explain why Wesley wasn't driving me. At least this way I could just say something came up with his job or his family. They didn't need to know all the details about our relationship. Or lack of. Or whatever was going on between us. I stood on their porch with my arms crossed to block against the chill in the air since I'd forgotten a jacket, waiting for the door to open and wishing I was anywhere but there. I just wanted to go back to my apartment and hide under my heavy down comforter until rehearsals started again. The lock clicked, and the door opened and I plastered a fake smile on my face like I had done so many times before in my life. But that smile faltered when I saw who it was who opened the door. "Kiddo?" Scott said, his green eyes widening by the second. "Javi, is that really you?" I nodded, too afraid to open my mouth and say anything else, too afraid of losing control of my already tenuous hold on my emotions. He reached out and pulled me into the house and into a bear hug, just like he used to when I was a kid. His hand came up and ruffled my hair, and he laughed. "What in the world are you doing here? How did this happen?" "It's kind of a long story," I chuckled. "Well, start talking," he said, leaning back to look at me again, holding me by my shoulders. I seriously can't believe you're here." I spied Shirley and Jack standing behind him, smug smiles on their faces, Jack leaning against his cane with his arm around Shirley's waist. I started telling Scott about everything that had happened since I came to California. I told him about seeing Wesley and about Sebastian bringing me to Jack and Shirley. I told him about being in the ballet company, and he smiled just as proudly as Jack had done when he found out. I told him everything. Well, almost everything. I didn't mention my dates with Wesley or our trip to the beach or how I'd fallen head over heels for the man who used to be my pen pal. While I spoke, we made our way to the dining room table, and Scott gasped and said, "Oh, it's your birthday." I nodded, and he laughed. "Well, happy birthday, kiddo." "No, Tiff?" I asked Shirley as she walked into the kitchen to grab the steaks resting on the counter. She set them in the center of the table and said, "No." The doctor put her on bed rest. "Everything is fine with the baby," she said before I could even ask. "She said she would call you tonight." I smiled and nodded. "Is Wesley on his way?" Shirley asked, as Scott brought the salad and potatoes into the dining room. Scott frowned. "Why would Wesley?" He glanced at me and then his parents. Oh. His lip twitched, but I just ignored his teasing. No. I don't think he's coming," I replied as I began to dish up my dinner. "Did something come up at work?" Jack asked as he did the same. "Yes," I lied, looking down at my food. I pushed my food around the plate with my fork as Scott asked Shirley something. I didn't even hear what they talked about as I ate my dinner slowly, taking small bites. I was lost in my own thoughts, back to second-guessing every moment Wesley and I had spent together since that night at the lake. Was it all fake? Had it meant nothing to him? "Haven?" Jack asked. I blinked, then set my fork down and wiped my mouth with my napkin. "Sorry, what?" I replied. I asked if you're okay. "Oh yeah, I'm fine," I said with another one of those fake smiles I'd perfected. They all just looked at me, all with varying degrees of "I don't believe you" looks plastered on their faces. I sighed and then shook my head. "No, actually, I'm not. Wesley and I asked him for some space to think about some things. I found out he was lying to me about something big, and I didn't know how to feel about it." Scott scowled and opened his mouth to speak, but Shirley cut him off before he could even start. "Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry." She reached across the table and grabbed my hand to give it a gentle squeeze. I forced a small grateful smile. "Is it something you two can work through?" I shrugged. "I don't know. I've tried calling him, but he won't answer or call me back." I inhaled and covered my mouth with my napkin, hoping they wouldn't notice my trembling hands. "Well, that doesn't sound like Wesley at all," Shirley said, furrowing her brow. I nodded in agreement. "I know. And now I feel." I stopped again. I felt like I'd felt all those years ago when I'd lost my family and my only friend. I felt like I was alone and abandoned. Like there was no one in the entire world who cared what happened to me. Like everyone and everything was against me and didn't give one thought to how their actions affected me. And I was the reason for all of it. I was the cause of my pain and my sadness. My one choice had changed the course of everything, had set my life down a path that wouldn't have appeared if I'd just been a good kid. Tears pricked the back of my eyes, and I put my elbows on the table and my head in my hands. "I'm sorry," I choked out, shaking my head. "It's okay, Haven, you're allowed to be upset," Shirley said. "I ruined everything." "It's just dinner. You're not ruining anything." I ran away, and then they took me away. If I had just stayed, then everything would be different. Everyone froze as they realized what I was talking about, and everyone was silent as the truth of my words settled over the room. If I just stayed in my room, then I'd still be Haven Kenway. I'd still be with you. I would never have lost touch with Wesley. And I'd be happy and with the only family I ever really had instead of with people who, I pursed my lips as a choked sob tried to force its way out. It's all my fault, I whispered, not even sure if I was referring to being taken away from them or everything that was going on with Wesley or all of it. Haven, it wasn't your fault, Scott murmured from beside me. I looked at him and his eyes were rimmed with red. It was my fault. I should have kept a better eye on you. I should have paid better attention and realized something wasn't right. And I should have stood up for you and insisted they let you see Dad. My lip trembled, and he opened his mouth again, but Shirley started talking first. It's my fault. I wouldn't let you see him, because I was too afraid of how you would react to his state. And I was too far gone in my own depression to— Enough! Jack exclaimed, his voice raspy. It's no one's fault. I shook my head, but he stood from his chair and limped over to me and hugged me. It's not your fault, any more than it's Scott's or Tiff's or Shirley's or mine. It's just something that happened, and there isn't anything we can do to change it. You can't keep blaming yourselves, he said, looking at each of us. It's not your fault, he whispered, tucking my head under his chin. I let it all out then. All of it. Every single tear of pain and sadness that I'd held back since that day the cop pulled me away from my family fell from my eyes uninhibited. Scott took my hand and squeezed it, his shoulders shaking as he then joined Dad in hugging me, and Mom came around the table and put her arms around all of us. I realized then that I wasn't alone. Not truly. I wouldn't ever have to feel the way I had since that day in the hospital, because they would always make sure I wasn't alone. And as the flow of my emotions ebbed, and I let myself feel the love of my true family, I sent a small thank you out into the universe. I didn't believe in fate or a higher power. Not really. But just in case there was someone out there watching out for me and guiding me, I wanted them to know I was grateful that they'd led me back to my parents.
Wesley's POV.
I was wrong. I was so wrong. Never in my life had I been so wrong about something. I thought for sure we would wrap everything up and wash our hands of this whole situation with Amber Forrest by Sunday. But Sunday came and went. And then Monday. And then Haven's birthday. And then Wednesday. Almost a week. Almost a whole fucking week had gone by, and we were no closer to having all the evidence we needed than we had been before I pretended to agree to this stupid union. Tim was drawing it out, demanding proof of our sincerity, asking us for things he had no right to ask of us before he'd give us the access we needed. But we had to play along, had to agree and keep up our facade. And that's how I ended up agreeing to a small, private mating ceremony with Nicole that was scheduled for late Friday evening. I wouldn't actually go through with it, of course, but it was the only way he would give us the account information for the merger. And despite that, what he gave us had missing details. We just had to hope it would incriminate him enough that the missing info would be enough to force the council to pull his title and dig more. We were still waiting to hear from them. The ceremony would just be us, our parents, and one witness each. He didn't care if his daughter's mating ceremony was extravagant, as long as her Luna ceremony was. After I'd agreed to that stupid request, I'd shoved my phone into the bottom of my dresser. I couldn't bear to see text after text and call after call from Haven come through and not answer. It was killing me and my leaking to ignore her, but it wasn't worth the risk it would bring to her safety for me to answer. Or sneak out to see her. I'd drunk myself into a stupor the night of her birthday, sitting in my dining room with Seb, Nolan, and Reed to make sure I didn't leave to go find out if we were mates. I'd wanted it more than anything. But I knew I wouldn't be able to hold myself or my leaking back if she was my mate. So I stayed locked in my house, pretending like I was the epitome of a playboy who just used her. I didn't even want to think about how she must feel. It had to be worse than how I felt. She probably felt completely used and abandoned. And it was all my fault. Just like when I lost her the first time. A knock on my front door brought me out of my spiral, and I answered it, surprised to find Nicole and Benjamin on my front porch. "What?" I snarled, annoyed at seeing their faces. Even though it wasn't their fault their dad was being a right pain in my ass, they were still a reminder of how, once again, I had fucked up and failed Haven.
We come in peace,
Ben said, lifting his hands in surrender, a thick envelope held in one. What's that? I grunted, gesturing at it as I stepped back to let them in. It's what you need, he said, passing in front of me and walking to my table. And what is it that you think I need? I asked as I closed the door. Evidence? Ben said with a small laugh, sitting down. All of it, Nicole added as she sat next to him. How'd you get it? I asked as I sat down across from them. I've had it. My dad is too cocky sometimes. He left it sitting out on his desk. I made photocopies of it. I've just been waiting for a chance to get it to you, Ben replied. What does your dad think you're doing here, then? Nicole said she wanted to spend some time with you before she leaves for her bachelorette tonight. He thinks we're fucking, she said bluntly. My leaking growled in my head and I let one spill out of my mouth too, not bothering to hide it from either of them. Oh, stop it, she said. You know I don't want you like that. I want my father gone and locked up just as much as you and your father do. Why? He's an ass, she said, crossing her arms. He's the reason our mother is dead, Ben confessed. He killed her? He might as well have, Nicole grumbled. He cheated on her. Constantly. She finally gave up. I'm sorry, I told them. Why don't you just challenge him? I asked Ben. Because I want everyone to know what kind of man he truly is. If I challenge him, that doesn't happen. But if I help expose him, then everyone sees him for what he is. And I'll have people who know I'm nothing like him.
Thank you,
I said as I took the folder from him. I'll get this to the council before the end of the day. You'll still need to keep the pretense of the alliance. Let him think you still planned to go through with the intimate union ceremony on Friday, so the council has time to make their move. If you suddenly back out now, he'll get suspicious, and who knows what he'll do. I sighed, but nodded. I know. I don't want to, but I know I have to. It will be over soon, and then you can work on making it up to your girl, he said. If she lets me, I muttered. I can't believe your dad is allowing you to have a bachelorette party. Oh, what daddy's little girl wants, she gets, Nicole said with a sly smile as she stood up and Ben followed her. He can't refuse my wolf pup eyes and my pout and my whining. So you're manipulative, I chuckled, walking them to the door. Only with him, she said, tossing her hair over her shoulder. Anyway, thank you for helping us, she added as I opened the door. I should be thanking you. How'd you know what my dad was trying to do, anyway? I asked, leaning against the frame after they exited my house. Just a lucky guess, honestly, Ben shrugged. I nodded, then shook his hand. Well, I will see you on Friday, I guess. Wait, Ben said, looking down at my hand, then back at me. Give her your shirt. Excuse me? Give Nicole your shirt. It will help make it seem like you two have been intimate, he said with a grimace. I growled, and Nicole rolled her eyes and said, he's right, though, Wes. The more we can play this up, the better. My growl didn't subside, but I pulled my shirt over my head and threw it at her without a word. The only consolation was it wasn't my favorite shirt, my Stanford shirt. That shirt was still with Haven. I watched them leave, praying to Celine that what Ben had given to me would be enough, and that this would all be over by the end of the day on Friday. And that Haven would understand and forgive me when all was said and done.
Haven's POV.
The music swirled and swelled around me in the studio as I danced. My feet and legs stretched and moved me throughout the room, my anger and pain fueling my movements. I performed each step from memory, connecting them to each other with ease, even though it had been years since I'd danced this piece. But it was my piece. My choreography. My story and my emotions that brought the steps together. I hit the final pose and held it, panting in the otherwise silent studio. My eyes squeezed shut as I held back the tears threatening to fall. Applause from behind me forced my eyes back open and pulled me out of my pose as I looked to see who had intruded on my studio time. Pale blonde hair and blue eyes met mine, and I held back an eye roll. Imogen. Just when I'd thought my week couldn't get any worse. I should have kept that thought to myself. I'm almost done, and then you can have the studio, I told her, moving towards the mirror to get my water bottle. That piece is really lovely, she said, stepping into the room and dropping her bag on the floor. Did you choreograph it yourself? I nodded as I sipped my water. For my dad, I whispered. Not my adopted dad, but never mind. I shook my head and closed my water, then moved to the stereo to unplug my phone from the system. I didn't need to explain anything to her, least of all my complicated childhood and family life. I didn't need to explain that I choreographed the piece at 15 to deal with the trauma from my childhood. That I created it so I would have a way to tell my story, even if no one but me knew that's what the piece was about. You need to let go, she said from behind me. Excuse me? I asked, whipping my head around. The ends of my 2 French braids whipped around my neck as I turned. What are you talking about? I added, furrowing my brow. Of your center, she clarified, walking closer, hesitantly. At the end, when you do the attitude? If you let go, it will be more fluid and natural. I stared at her, not moving from my spot by the stereo. You have the technique. The foundation. All of that is second nature to you, and it's lovely, but sometimes you have to let yourself let go of that strict technique. When the style or choreography calls for it, then your dancing will really move to the next level. Are you giving me advice? I asked. She ignored my question. Try it, she said, nodding towards the center of the studio. I turned on my music, starting it just before the spot she'd referred to. Then I walked to the center and ran through the ending section, letting go of my strict hold on my center like Imogen had suggested on the attitude. When the music ended, I dropped the pose and turned, finding Imogen with her phone out, recording me. Come over here. Watch, she said, waving me over with a smile. I trudged over to her, trying to hide my displeasure and annoyance at having to stand near her. I wasn't sure what game she was playing with me. She never gave me the time of day during classes or rehearsals, had practically insulted me at the gala, and suddenly she wanted to act like we were best friends? I was wary, for sure. She handed her phone to me, and I watched the video, not seeing anything different from every other video I had of myself doing this piece. Okay? I asked, raising my brow. Watch the next one, she said, swiping it to the left and pressing play. I blinked, flicking my eyes to her and back to the phone. I hadn't even realized she'd been there long enough to record me when I was dancing the first time. But I didn't question her or say anything. I just watched. See? Right there, she exclaimed, pointing at the screen. I frowned and rewound it, pushing her finger away so I could see better. There, she cried again. See the difference? See how it just takes that entire section to the next level? I nodded and handed her back her phone. I could see the difference. And I felt it too when I was dancing. But her sudden friendliness still befuddled me. Thanks, I said, turning back to grab my phone. Of course, she said, picking her bag back up and moving it over near my water bottle. Sometimes an outside perspective or fresh eyes can make a big difference in our execution of a piece. Even one we've done for years and think we have down perfectly. I nodded again, disconnecting my phone from the speaker. Do you mind watching me run through one of my pieces for the Nutcracker? She asked me as I picked my bag up. I looked at her as she sat on the floor, stretching. Sure, I sighed, dropping my bag back on the floor and plopping down next to it. I crossed my legs under me and unlocked my phone as Imogen kept stretching. I checked for any messages or missed calls from Wesley, even though I knew there would be none. But I couldn't help but hope anyway. I blew out a breath and tossed it in my bag, my head leaning back against the mirror and my eyes shutting for a moment as I quelled the rage brewing in the pit of my stomach. As much as she ground my gears, Imogen didn't need my ire accidentally directed at her. She cleared her throat, and I tilted my head down to find her staring at me. I wanted to apologize, she muttered. I raised my brow at her. For? I haven't exactly been nice to you. Or welcoming, she said. In truth, I was kind of jealous, she admitted. Why? Everything is so easy for you. Not even 21 and already a soloist. The way you just learn the choreography so easily, and your effortless performances, she shook her head and sighed. Meanwhile, I'm over here working my ass off to learn all these new pieces and keep them straight and make my dancing look like that of a deserving principal. I work hard too, I told her. I put in tons of extra hours here, and I never miss a Saturday class. Just because you don't see the work doesn't mean it's not happening. I never said my jealousy was logical. Just that it existed, she scoffed. And I am 21 now, I pointed out. Semantics, she said, waving me off. My lips twitched in a half-hearted laugh. My point is, I was jealous, and I treated you poorly because of that, and I'm sorry. I blew out a breath. Ballet is hard enough as it is. We should be lifting each other up, not tearing each other down. I've never really been good at making friends, she said with a shrug as she crossed one arm in front of her chest to stretch her shoulder. Me neither, I replied with a one-shouldered shrug of my own. She smirked as she swung her arms and then reached up and behind her back to stretch more. Seems we have more in common than I thought, she told me. She stood up then and plugged her phone into the system. I stayed in my spot on the floor against the mirror as she ran through her piece, giving her feedback and laughing with her when she missed a count or messed up a step, my own stresses and worries forgotten for the moment. What do you mean you didn't do anything for your birthday? Imogen asked as she picked her stuff up and we walked towards the door after she finished rehearsing. I mean, I had dinner with my foster family, but other than that, I didn't do anything. But it's your 21st. You have to do something big. I shrugged. Hold please, she said, pulling her phone out and tapping away rapidly on it. I paused in the doorway, adjusting my bag on my arm as I waited for her. And done! She exclaimed. With what? I asked, just as my own phone vibrated in my hand. I looked down at it and internally cringed as I read the text flashing across the screen, the text that Imogen had sent out to every company employee. Come to Moonlighters on Friday night at 8 p.m. to celebrate our very own soloist Haven Kenway's 21st birthday. Imogen! Haven! Why? Because, 1, you turned 21 and need to shout it from the rooftops, and 2, you need to stop moping about that boy. If he can't realize what he's missing out on by ignoring you, then you need to just move on. I gaped at her and gave an incredulous laugh. I haven't, I shook my head and sighed. Fine. Fine. You know what? You're right. I deserve to have fun for my birthday. I'm not going to let him ruin it, I said with more confidence than I felt. That's the spirit, Imogen declared. Now, let's go shopping for club outfits. Wesley. What the hell is taking her so long? Where the hell is she? Alpha Pierce growled as he paced back and forth in the conference room, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it over and over. I stood off to the side, leaning against the wall with my arms and legs crossed, my gray suit jacket thrown over one of the few chairs in the room. My mom and Fiona had cleared out the conference table and most of the chairs and rearranged what was left for the charade of a mating ceremony. The only people in attendance were my parents, Alpha Timothy, and Reed. Seb and Nolan were in the city, at the club. Maya had approached me on Thursday, telling me of the mass text sent to every member and employee of the Redwood Forest Ballet Company inviting them to the club for Haven's birthday. I immediately enlisted Seb and Nolan to go stand watch for the evening, even though my dad said not to. But I knew it would be the end of our charade, since King Malachi had called my dad to let him know they would send someone to apprehend Alpha Pierce at the ceremony. And I wasn't willing to spend an entire night knowing Haven was out at some club. Alone. Wearing Celine knew what and being ogled by men and werewolves and potentially other supernaturals as well. My Leakin had snarled and raged in my head at that thought, and his tantrum was only sort of calmed because he knew Nolan and Sebastian would protect her. They had used scent blockers. Just in case someone from Pierce's pack was there. Then, they'd gone to the club in town early to set up camp in one of the more private VIP booths that still offered a view of the club floor. I'd had high hopes that we would wrap everything up nice and tidy in the early evening, and I'd be able to sneak away. Maybe even catch Haven before she made it to the club so I could talk to her and explain and beg for her forgiveness. But as had been the case, more often than not, luck was not on my side. Not only was King Malachi's representative from the palace late, but Nicole was late as well. Timothy was close to blowing a fuse, a vein pulsing in his forehead, and under the calm I presented on the surface, I was a raging storm. My leakin paced back and forth in my head, unable to settle, more on edge than I'd felt him in weeks. My skin prickled, and I felt as though I might shift at any moment. I gripped my arms with my hands to keep from reaching for my cell phone that I'd dug out of my dresser that morning so I'd have a way to stay in touch with Nolan and Seb. Under any other circumstance, I'd be texting them every 5 minutes to make sure everything was fine. Then again, under any other circumstance, I'd be with them instead of at the pack house. I'd be with her instead of pretending to be engaged to another woman. How much longer do we have to wait? I asked my dad through the mind link. Can't we lock him in one of our cells? No. And you know that. We have no authority to do so. The king would question every piece of evidence we gave him. We have to do this the right way. I clenched my jaw but didn't argue further. The right way. The right way had only gotten us so far. Not just with the situation with Pierce, but with so much more. It shouldn't matter if we locked him up. He was a piece of shit. The evidence Ben gave us proved that. Not only had he been funneling money from their businesses into the pack funds and his personal funds, but he'd also received money from numerous sources for letting them use his pack as a holding area for merchandise. We hadn't been able to ascertain whether that merchandise was drugs or people or both, but it didn't matter. It was illegal, shady, and would be what brought him down. I didn't want him on our lands any longer than necessary, though, which was why I was so frustrated that both Nicole and the council representative were late. I was worried Tim would take off to look for her if she took any longer, and we needed him there when the council member arrived. Otherwise, he might catch wind of it and flee before we got him cuffed and behind bars for the night. I swear to Celine if that girl doesn't have a damn good reason, Alpha Timothy muttered under his breath, his head shaking. I narrowed my eyes at him, daring him to finish that thought. She may not be my actual mate, or even who I would take as my chosen mate for real, but she had helped us and shown she had good intentions. I would not stand for her father threatening to harm her. Thankfully, I didn't have to say anything to him in her defense, because the door opened just then, and she stepped through, Benjamin with her. But my relief only lasted for a moment. Because as soon as she was in the middle of the room, we all noticed something different about her. "What have you done?" Alpha Pierce roared as she approached him, her head held high, his eyes wide and wild. "You stupid, stupid girl," he added, raising his hand to strike her. Ben stepped in front of her, and another male entered, grabbing Nicole and pulling her behind him. He had his claws out, and his pupils dilated with rage as he stared at her father. "Who the hell are you?" Timothy growled, looking the male up and down with distaste. "Alpha Altenbauer of Vigna della Luna," he growled. "Your daughter's mate." "Explain!" Timothy spat, glaring at his daughter under Alton's arm. "He was at the winery we went to for the bachelorette party," Nicole said, her hands wrapping around Alton's arm. "His pack owns it, and he was there checking on things." Alton's body relaxed under his mate's touch, his head turning just enough so he could glance at her over his shoulder. I blinked as I watched their interaction, watched as she cooled his rage with just her presence and touch. "I went crazy running around the winery all afternoon trying to find her," he said. "Her scent led me on a wild goose chase." Nicole's lips twitched into a smile, and I couldn't help but smile, too, seeing her so happy with her mate. Even though it caused a temporary snag with our plan, it would still be okay. We could let Timothy rant and rage and throw a fit for as long as needed until the council member arrived. "And you just let him mark you?" Timothy asked, still glaring at Nicole. "Did you force her?" he added, stepping closer to Alton, getting up in his face. But Alton didn't flinch. His blue eyes just stared down at the shorter Alpha in front of him. "I didn't do anything to her that she didn't ask me for," Alton drawled, a self-satisfied smile on his lips. and she asked me for it several times. Nicole's eyes widened, and Benjamin blew out a breath, his hand running through his hair. Timothy sputtered, his face turning deeper shades of red with each passing second as he worked through everything Alton insinuated. I couldn't help but admire his determination and courage. Coming here unannounced with his mark on the daughter of another alpha on the day she was supposed to be mated to a different alpha. Brave, but possibly stupid. Unless Nicole had told him it was all a gimmick, all an act. "You will reject him," Timothy told Nicole once he'd grabbed hold of his temper, his voice low and leaving no room for argument, an alpha command laced into his words. "I'm already marked, and so is he," she told him, standing her ground, her grip tightening on Alton's arm. Timothy inhaled again, his face somehow growing even redder than before as he confirmed with his nose that not only was she marked, but that she'd marked Alton back. "At the full moon," he said, using the same tone as before, "we will have a council member come to the pack. They will perform the rejection ritual for couples who have already marked each other." "We will do no such thing," Alton told him, moving backwards with Nicole. "You have no right to order her to do such a thing. She is my daughter and my pack member." "She is my mate and my Luna!" Alton roared. "You lost all ability to alpha command her the minute I put that mark on her neck," he added smugly. "Nicole makes her own choices now." He pulled her under his arm and kissed her temple. "Come, my Luna," he said. "We need to get home to our pack." And with that, he walked her out of the conference room, not stopping to speak to anyone else. Ben had his lips pursed together, a pained look on his face. I wasn't sure if he was trying not to laugh or cry. Because I felt the same way. I wanted to cry in relief and laugh at the look on Timothy's face as he realized he'd lost one of his pawns. "You!" he roared as he turned towards me. "This is all your fault. You Stones always have your hands in everything, always mucking up my plans. You did this so you could have a way out." "Yes, because I have an in with Celine and can talk to her whenever I want or ask her to suddenly make people mates," I scoffed with a roll of my eyes. There was no way for any of us to know she'd meet her true fated mate before this ceremony. "Don't smart-mouth me, boy," he snarled, pointing at me. "You need to learn your place." I just stared at him, my face cold and emotionless. I wanted to wrap my hand around his stupid finger and bend it backwards until it broke. I wanted to twist his arm around his back until he learned that my place was above him, with him on the ground begging me for mercy. My Leakin nodded in my head, flashing me images of all the terrible things we could do to him if we had him in our clutches, each idea more cruel than the previous. But I refrained. I held myself back. We needed to keep him here until whoever was coming from the palace arrived, and if I made a move to attack him, he'd leave. He jabbed his finger towards me once more, and I held back a laugh so I wouldn't provoke him further. He then turned and began pacing the room again, stroking his chin. "So what do you propose we do now?" he asked. "What do you mean?" my dad replied. Tim began, "I mean this alliance? My daughter has her mate now, and—" "Dad?" Maddie's voice interrupted from the hallway. "Dad, what is going on? We've all been waiting for 5 ever, and I'm bored," she said as she opened the door and strolled in without a care. Everyone froze, and every eye in the room moved to her. Mom paled, and Dad stood up slowly, walking towards Maddie. "Madeline," he said in a low voice. "I told you to stay outside." She swallowed and glanced at everyone, keeping her sassy mouth shut for once in her life. Reed's jaw ticked. But he didn't move from his spot, even though I knew he wanted to get her out of there and away from Alpha Pierce as much as the rest of us did. "Who is this?" Timothy asked, eyeing Maddie calculatingly, his eyes looking her up and down. "Is this your youngest?" he added, turning to look at Dad. "Maddie, go back downstairs," he told her, ignoring Timothy's question. "Wait," Timothy said, holding his hands up, his eyes now holding a slight glint of excitement. "Wait, this could work." "What could work?" I asked, my brow furrowing as I watched him look at Ben and then back at Maddie. "No," Reed growled, standing up straight from where he leaned against the wall, his arms uncrossing as he clenched his hands into fists at his side. You have a daughter, and I have a son, Timothy continued, ignoring Reed. There's no reason to cancel this mating ceremony. We'll have Maddie and Ben mate instead of Nicole and Wes. The growls and roars that filled the room at his words echoed so loudly that it was likely the entire pack heard us from the lawn outside. I saw red, and my lichen snapped and snarled in my head, my claws shooting out without warning. Timothy just kept talking, his volume rising to be heard over the din. The contract can still stand. We can still have our alliance, and your daughter will be a Luna and still be close. What the fuck is wrong with you? Ben roared, his eyes almost bulging, his face as red as his father's had been earlier. She is a child. Let's go, Maddie, Reed muttered, moving forward and weaving around everyone to reach her. The volume of the shouts and voices in the room kept rising to where I couldn't hear what anyone said as everyone spoke at once. Reed grabbed Maddie's hand and pulled her out of the room. Ben was up in his dad's face, spittle flying as he continued to say Goddess only knew what to him, my dad holding him back from launching himself onto Timothy. My lichen paced again, more agitated than ever. Growls and snarls fell out of his mouth, adding to the noise echoing in my head. I moved forward to help Dad keep Ben at bay when a mind link came through from Sebastian. You need to come help me. Now. My response was instant and urgent, my feet moving me through the room before my mind could catch up and before Seb could even respond, before I knew where to find him. My heart thudded against my ribs as I feared the worst. Why? What's going on? He hesitated for only a moment, then replied, It's Haven.